Nick Mattiello got himself into a significant number of issues. Let's check off the boxes. Number one is his former campaign consultant, Jeff Britt, is scheduled for trial on March 10th. I think there's a strong expectation that this will not be a one-day trial and that Mr. Britt will have more to say about the goings-on of the 2016 election. Number two, a personal friend, baseball coach to his son, etc., former state trooper, Demers was the head of security at the Convention Center Authority. He got into personnel issues in the building, very serious allegations made by a female coworker. The speaker intervened on his behalf and then threatened and implemented an audit using the Joint Committee on Legislative Services, something that he unilaterally controls by all designations. That was rejected by the Convention Center Authority, deemed to be illegal, and deemed by Bernie Bonanno not exactly a person to enter into political frays. I can't ever remember Bernie Bonanno ever entering into a political fray. He said that that was politically motivated by the speaker, and that it was straight out retribution against the Convention Center for trying to take appropriate personnel actions against the speaker's friend.
And the speaker has since withdrawn that position.
Has since withdrawn it, also under a threatened lawsuit by Blake Filippi. The state police have initiated an investigation into this. State police don't investigate misdemeanors, I don't think. I don't think they spend a lot of time on third-tier issues. And a number of other issues have come out relative to how files are being protected and contracts for cleanup firms and all the rest of it. What's this about?
Well, it's obviously about politics, and it's obviously about some missteps the speaker has taken. It's pretty clear that the way the audit was started for the convention center was not good procedure, and how much trouble the speaker's in or is not in, none of us know. We have to wait to see what happens. Red trial. We have to see what happens with the state police investigation. So it could be very minor, or it could be very serious. I don't know, but you have to give the system a chance to find out and report what's going on.
Is JCLS fundamentally flawed?
Yes, and this is what I think. Now you've asked the important question. Thank God.
It takes me a while, but finally I get there.
No, because see, I get a kick out of all these. First the Republicans say this, and the Democrats say this, and who kissed whose sister, and it goes all around. But there's an opportunity here to talk about real reform, which, by the way, I chaired the Blue Ribbon Commission on Legislative Reform, which recommended reducing the size of the legislature, which the people did approve, but it also had a set of recommendations about the Joint Committee on Legislative Services and the legislative budget. And there's a tremendous opportunity here, and I wish people would focus on real reform, because whether the speaker's right or he was wrong, or whether you make some political changes, nothing changes. You just change people who's sitting in what chair.
There is nothing else in state government in which one person oversees a $50 million budget.
Well, let's talk about it's not quite right. But let's talk about what's the legislative budget. If you don't make the structural changes, then all this political stuff is noise. And so the legislative budget. I think people don't understand what the legislative budget is. So I want to take a second to explain it. It's $47 million. That's true, but $13 million is very transparent and very accountable and identified in the budget document. There's $6 million operate the General Assembly. That's legislative pay and the people that run the Assembly. There's another money in the budget for operation of the Auditor General's office, for the House Fiscal Advisory staff, professional agencies. And those are fine budgets. They're very transparent, they're very clear. You know what you're getting from the Auditor General, you know what you're getting from House Fiscal, you know what you're getting from Legislative Counsel. You can argue of part-time lawyers and some political appointments, but that's 13 or 15 million of the budget that is not arbitrarily administered in any way. It's very, very clear. There's another 27 million that goes for the joint committee controls, and in theory, that is for the administration of the legislative branch, for personnel, for payroll, for purchasing, for maintenance, and the system needs to be fixed. So if you just correct the political noise that exists right now, whether the speaker was right or wrong, and don't make those structural changes to the joint committee, you ain't accomplished anything worth a damn, and you're just gumming. You just, one size up, one size down, but at the end of the day, the people get the same
So
problem.
the 27 million that you described, literally is at the sole discretion of the Speaker of the House?
Well, it's at the...
There's no meetings,
Well,
there's no votes, there's no minutes?
So how do you fix it? Okay, so there's a couple of things you do. And one thing I'm going to suggest is unpopular politically, but at a certain point, you got to give the House and Senate parity in this joint committee. So
What's the fun of being Speaker of the House if you have parity with the Senate?
well, because there are certain things you can do to manage that parity effectively and still maintain a great deal of authority. So you get parity with the Senate. You have 6 people on the joint committee. You put the Senate minority person. But then this is what has to happen to make the legislature work, is you do what any normal business organization would do. The whole thing's a patronage system. Mm-hmm. So you adopt classifications, job descriptions, your performance evaluation, you professionalize the operation of the Joint Committee. Once you professionalize the operation of the Joint Committee, you still have politics, and whether you have 5 or 6 people serving on the board, but the relationship is different.
Right.
It's not a patronage system, it's a professional system. So the thing I would strongly recommend is that you get rid of the patronage system. You recognize that there's going to be a certain amount of patronage for political appointees that every political institution needs, but by and large, the people that do the administration, the purchasing, the maintenance, make information technology, do that kind of activity, ought to have job descriptions. They ought to be hired based on their qualifications to meet those job descriptions. There ought to be professional management in place that evaluates their performance and then reports back to this board. That's a different dynamic.
Right.
There's no process that solves problems, but if you have that kind of culture in place, you have a different kind of Joint Committee on Legislative Affairs, whether the Speaker controls it or whether there's parity. The other thing that you need to do, so there's accountability, if you look through budgets, there are cost centers. So there's a cost center in the legislative
Sure.
budget for the Auditor General, for the fiscal staffs, for the Legislative Council. Take the Joint Committee's budget and create at least 2 cost centers. One cost center for the Senate and one cost center for the House. I can look at that budget. I can generally read a budget. I can't tell you how much is being spent to operate the House.
No, you have no idea.
And how much to operate the Senate. So those sound like kind of nerdy kind of changes, but they're the important ones. Accountability for the budget, cost centers, professional job descriptions. So people are hired based on
Right.
where they meet the job descriptions. Patronage, evaluation of those people. So professional people are evaluating them, who then deal with their bosses, who are the elected officials, who are the Joint Committee.
How does this get forced through? If I'm the Speaker of the House, I haven't had a meeting, there hasn't been a meeting in arguably 8 or 10 years. Nick Mattiello's never had a meeting. Blake Filippi just found out he's the secretary of the Joint Committee on Legislative Services.
Well, somebody said no good crisis should go unused.
Yeah, that's right.
Maybe there'll be enough public concern and enough public heat that there'll be a come to Jesus meeting, and we'll be able to get these kinds of reforms, because these are reforms that we've spoken and written about for over a decade now.
Right.
And they're the basic things, and I won't sit here and tell you that that's automatically going to result in better government, because form doesn't make the function absolutely better. But I know those are the kinds of safeguards you put in place. I'm going to repeat myself, if you don't mind. Job descriptions,
Right.
hire people that meet the job descriptions, performance evaluations, promote people.
Accountability,
Yeah.
just basic accountability.